Welcome to our World Heritage 2021 debate. 2021 debate is a year of events focused on protection, conservation, and management of World Heritage. We want to uncover untold stories to broaden our views on heritage practices and future perspectives. Knowledge gathered this year will be published in 2022 on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of the convention. The Our World Heritage Initiative is created by individuals working on 100% voluntary capacity. We would like to point out that Our World Heritage provides an open dialogue platform that is based on voluntary work of session organizers and speakers. Our World Heritage welcomes diverse viewpoints in the spirit of collegial debate where mutual respect is afforded to all. Please note that the expressed views do not necessarily reflect the official position of Our World Heritage. We thank today's speakers for telling their stories, and we thank you, the listeners, for your kind interest and questions. If you want to remain up to date on our activities, you can follow our social media. We maintain channels in multiple languages to break through the language barriers and connect to local communities. You will find all links on our website, ourworldheritage.org. Thank you for being with us today, and we wish you a very fruitful event.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everyone in the audience today. I would like to welcome you to session 20, Heritage Economics, Evidence-Based Innovative Practices. This is the second session, which is dedicated to heritage economics. And today's session will reflect on innovative practices. Since the beginning of modern conservation, the protection and preservation of tangible heritage still justifies itself on the basis of cultural values considered as intrinsic values, values that things have inherently for what they are or as an end. But during its evolution, heritage conservation has faced more challenges, partly because of the successful addition of heritage sites, monuments, and buildings that require additional financial means, partly because of the threatening environment of urbanization, rural exits, and climate change. These challenges have been so great that protection and preservation of cultural heritage today cannot be justified anymore on the sole basis of intrinsic cultural values. As a consequence, intrinsic values may become one means among other cultural values that may be intermediary values to achieve overarching goals. A new paradigm of conservation based not only on what heritage stands for, but on what heritage contributes to achieve. This session aims to reflect on this new paradigm and to the contribution of heritage economics to it by showing evidence for innovative practices, synchronizing values and goals, cultural significance and sustainable development, means and ends of conservation requires activating pluridisciplinary techniques at every step of the conservation process, and to do so with the help of innovative models in terms of governance, partnership, financing, and decision-making. For those joining us now, welcome to today's session. Before we start, I would like to kindly remind you to keep your microphones muted when you're not talking, and please type your questions in the chat box. A recorded version of this seminar will be available on YouTube channel of Our World Heritage. Now I would like to introduce today's first speaker. Our first speaker, actually, I would like to share also my screen. So, yes. Our first speaker today is Donovan Rickman. He's the president of Heritage Strategies International. Working at the nexus of heritage conservation and economic development, RIPMA has undertaken assignments in 49 US states and more than 50 countries. He's the author of The Economics of Historic Preservation, which has been translated into Korean, Georgian, and Russian. He serves on the Real Estate Market Advisory Group of the UN Economic Commission for Europe. Repma holds a master's degree in historic preservation from Columbia University. He teaches a graduate course in preservation economics at the University of Pennsylvania, where he received the Perkins Award for Distinguished Teaching. In 2012, Repma received the Crown Shield Award from the National Trust, the highest preservation honor and awarded for lifetime contribution to historic preservation in the United States. So Donovan, I would like to warmly welcome you today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Aruba, and I'm just thrilled to be part of the Our World Heritage Symposium series. For those of you who didn't see the economic session a week ago, please go to YouTube and view it, because it was just extraordinary. As somebody who has been in this field myself for 40 years, I learned a huge amount. So going back and look at that, and I'll point out that a lot of discussion a week ago was the challenge of looking at the values of the economic values of heritage on a non-market basis. Well, my presentation is very much going to be on the market side. We look at the market differences of heritage, and I want to start out with a quotation from a Nobel economist. Over the long term, places with strong distinctive identity are more likely to prosper than places without them. Every place must identify its strongest, most distinctive features and develop them, or run the risk of being all things to all persons and nothing special to any. Livability is not a middle class luxury. It is an economic imperative. And to a large extent, it's our heritage resources that make that distinctive features. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to give you most data from the US. A lot of what my firm does is measure the impacts of heritage. And over the last 4 or 5 years, we've done city level studies in 10 or 12 cities, some of which you'll know about: New York City and Miami and Los Angeles. Some you probably never heard of, like Cumberland, Maryland, and Saratoga Springs. But I'm going to share you some of the findings from these studies that we've undertaken. Well, the first issue is jobs. And again, we're often called a heritage consulting firm, but we're really in the business of economic development and demonstrating the economic role of heritage, and that begins with jobs. There's an issue of labor intensity, and labor intensity means more jobs. In the US, every time there's 100 jobs created in new construction, there's another 135 jobs elsewhere in the economy. But when there's 100 jobs in rehabilitation, there's 186 jobs elsewhere in the economy. In the US, when workers on a new building get paid $100 in income, there's $145 elsewhere in the economy in labor income. But $100 in labor income and rehabilitation generates ultimately $174 in labor income elsewhere in the economy. This is this issue of labor intensity. And then there's the issue about investment and where investment is. A few years ago, I was doing a training session with the Dutch Culture Ministry in Rotterdam at Erasmus University, and almost by accident met a real geeky-like economist, a professor there, who had a giant database of direct foreign investment from all over the world. A firm in New York invested in Nairobi, a firm in Tel Aviv invested in wherever, in Moscow. And so what we did is started with a premise, and that if today jobs, unlike most of human history, if jobs are following people instead of people following jobs, if people, and especially young knowledge workers, are choosing first where to live based on life factors and the jobs follow them, And if many of us will claim that heritage is a significant quality of life indicator, then there ought to be more examples of direct foreign investment in strong heritage cities. So here's what we did. We identified European cities that are both World Heritage cities and belong to the Organization of World Heritage Cities, recognizing that they must have thought it was kind of important. Identify comparable cities on other factors, size and human capital, 190 comparable cities, and then compare the instances of foreign direct investment with similar non-heritage cities. And here was the finding, that over this 10-year period, that those heritage cities typically attracted 40 more instances of direct foreign investment than did the non-heritage cities. Then the issue of property values. That what does it mean when a property is listed historic building? Well, this is a component that we use in almost every one of our studies. This is the city of Savannah, one of the great historic cities in the US. And we looked at a 15-year period from 1999 to 2014. And those years are significant because in the late 90s and early 2000s, real estate was going up at kind of a ridiculous level. And then the worldwide crash in real estate, and then a gradual recovery. And this 15-year period covers all three of those cycles. So we looked at the change in value in the local historic districts and compared them to the city of Savannah as a whole. In every instance, the historic districts outperform the overall market. Some of these are quite wealthy neighborhoods. Some of them are neighborhoods that are the opposite of wealthy, didn't make any difference. All of them outperformed the overall market. Then the issue about small and startup businesses. I guess I'm a believer in the marketplace, but I'm particularly a fan of small and startup businesses. So it's interesting to see where they choose to locate their businesses. You may or may not have heard of Nashville, Tennessee, but it's a big music center in the US, but it's also a very rapidly growing city. Only 3% of all of the jobs in Nashville are in historic districts, but 11% of the job growth, 13% of the startup jobs, and 15% of all small business jobs are in those districts. Again, there's a concept in economics called revealed preferences, and these businesses are revealing their preferences to be in these historic districts. This is the city of San Antonio, 8th largest city in the US. And the purple areas on the map are local historic districts. The green circles are concentration of jobs within small businesses in this case being firms that have 19 or fewer employees. And what you can see, it's not that every small business chose to be in the historic districts, but this great pattern of magnetism that they want to be in or near those historic districts. In New York City, we looked at Manhattan. Manhattan is the borough of New York that makes the covers of magazines and in TV shows and movies. Well, in women or minority-owned businesses in Manhattan, they only constitute less than 5% of all the businesses in all of Manhattan, but 7% of the businesses in historic districts. And the very small businesses, 5 people or less, that's 57% of all the businesses in Manhattan, but 62% of the businesses in historic districts in Manhattan. And these districts have a particular attraction for creative class workers and knowledge workers. A few years ago, I took a class from Penn to Serbia. And one of the tasks was to look at the link between the creative industries in Serbia, and that's a country where there's huge growth among the creative industries, and heritage. So one of my students did a heat map of Belgrade, and the blue and green areas are a concentration of historic resources in Belgrade, and the dots are the variety of creative business in Belgrade. Once again, this pattern of those businesses choosing to be in historic precincts. Here is New York City. And you can love New York City or you can hate it, but nobody can argue that it's not one of the most creative cities in the world. That in Manhattan, about 12% of all of the jobs are in historic districts, but 23% of the jobs in the arts, entertainment, and recreation sectors, the core of the creative class, has chosen to be in those historic districts. Again, it's true not only in Manhattan, but over the whole city of New York, which is the green measurement. Indianapolis, a city you're probably less familiar with, 3.6% of the land area is within historic districts in Indianapolis. 16% of the jobs are in historic district, but 28% of the jobs in the core professional technical services kind of job that is the heart of the knowledge industries. Again, this revealing the preferences of businesses in those areas choosing to be in historic districts. And then the issue about kind of triple bottom line values. We need to be thinking as conservation professionals of this broader spectrum of what sustainable development is and needs to be. And we just finished in Calgary, Alberta in Canada. They have 4 commercial historic districts with a concentration of heritage buildings. And they wanted to know the value of those on a triple bottom line basis, so economic and social and environmental. So here's what we discovered. So we looked on the economic side, and the heritage buildings in those districts had a base economic value of about $404 million. But because they were heritage buildings, the marketplace gave them a premium, a heritage premium of another $44 million, over 10% more. Isolating all the other variables, because they were heritage buildings, they had a value of $44 million or more. And then in these 4 commercial districts, there were about $275 million worth of buildings that were not heritage buildings. However, they garnered another $57 million worth of value because of their proximity to heritage buildings. We call that the heritage, this expanded impact that buildings are more valuable because they're close to heritage buildings. And then we did what's called a willingness to pay survey. And we used that. And so a survey went out, random sample of Calgary citizens, of how much would you pay to maintain the character and quality of each of these 4 heritage districts. Well, that added another $80 million that we called a proxy for the social value. And then our colleagues at the architectural firm with whom we were collaborating looked at the environmental value of these buildings. They looked at the embodied carbon, the embodied energy, and the cost savings of not throwing those buildings into the landfill. So as a result, the total value, something $900 million of total value, but that was $231 million more than the base economic value, that premium, environmental, social, and economic premium that those heritage buildings represent. And then this issue about between the tangible heritage and the intangible heritage. We don't do much looking at tourism, and the title of my presentation is The Benefits Beyond Tourism. But I'm going to talk about tourism here in the city of Nashville, because Nashville has this great intangible heritage of the music industry, famous worldwide. And they also happen to have a tourism office that has great data. So we looked at the characteristics of the heritage visitors, not so much what they did as heritage visitors, but their participation in this intangible heritage of the music in Nashville. So more of them went to Nashville because of the music, more of the heritage visitors than visitors at large. They spent more money. They visited more music venues across the board. They were much greater appreciators of the intangible heritage when they were, in fact, driven by the tangible heritage for their visitation. One American economist, I'm going to end with another one, and that's the economist John Kenneth Galbraith, who wrote, "The preservation movement has one great curiosity. There is never retrospective controversy or neglect. Preservationists are the only people in the world who are invariably confirmed in their wisdom after the fact." Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Donovan, first of all, for keeping the time. This is quite outstanding. and for the insightful remarks actually about the other impacts and spillovers of conservation and adaptive reuse. Maybe we will come back to this later in the questions and answers, because I'm curious about some aspects you mentioned during your presentation. I will encourage also the audience to type in their questions in the chat, and we will have time to discuss with Donovan afterwards. I would like now to present our next speaker. So I will share again my screen. Our next speaker is Alessio Re. Professor Dr. Alessio Re is an expert in cultural economics, and he works as Secretary General at Fondazione Sant'Agata in Turin. He is an expert in culture economics, and he teaches as adjunct professor at the University of Turin and University of Pisa in Italy. He also serves as coordinator at the Master in Cultural Property Protection, the Master in World Heritage and Cultural Projects for the Development, the International Academy on UNESCO and Sustainable Development, and Heritage Beyond Walls program. Alessio worked as consultant for UNESCO in Italy, Serbia, Montenegro, Iran, Greece, Cambodia, and Pakistan, as well as in post-disaster needs assessment 2014 and capacity building programs in 2010. Welcome, Alessio. Thank you very much for being here. The floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Ruba. Thanks a lot, all the organizer, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to stay with you today, this evening. Let me immediately share my screen so that I can go on with the presentation that I prepared for this session today. So let me just say that I was really impressed by the data and the presentation that were just presented. So it was it's an amazing work, of course, of research, of survey. Let me introduce the topic of today, of my presentation, a little bit, saying that I would like to contextualize the briefs that I'm going to share in a moment of great, how could I say, ambiguity and uncertainty. Which is which is for sure pushing to all of us to understand or to understand better, or to make an exercise effort to understand what's the value. I mean, the economic, since we are talking about economics today, the economic value, the social value, because economics is not distinguished by the society of culture. And this is, of course, pushing all of us to make possibly a good use of our resources. We all share the idea that culture and cultural heritage are resources for economic development. So they matter. Because they create an impact, which is the impact which Donovan was mentioning just a few minutes before, in direct terms or indirect induced terms. And what we can observe, I mean, I'm speaking from Torino, I'm speaking from the work, from the experience that we gain thanks to the work that I do for the Fondazione Sant'Agata, for the economics of culture. We are assisting to a strong push for innovation to face all these demographic, climate, social changes, and realizing that the ordinary solution probably are not always working well, or not enough. And I'm saying this also in relation to World Heritage, because this global semi-webinar is about our World Heritage. And there are, to my side, from my perception, having assisted also to some of the presentation of the other webinars, some probably, I wouldn't say misunderstandings, but probably something that should be seriously reconsidered about what's the role of world heritage, all heritage, of course, but especially world heritage. So, by the way, having said that, there is, of course, a huge literature providing evidence on the capacity of culture to count. And but our work in our foundation is especially, apart from doing research on this, is especially to try to transfer these principles into practice, possibly, and so to identify what are the most fitting, effective tools for doing that. Today, what's the meaning of all this? What is heritage today? Heritage is an evolving concept. What's the meaning of considering heritage as a capital? We know that the implications are very articulates, very huge, and evolving. I try to schematize some of the evidence from our research work, talking about heritage and economics, and so touching also the management question, because management is what we normally use to say as to unveil this economic value. We know that we are moving, we have moved already, we are moving from the ordinary, the standard conservation approach to what we can define value-based approach, and then people at the center, or possibly at the center. And nowadays, of course, the question is about the development, sustainable development, where to us, conservation is not a contradiction, no, with all this, is the pre-requirement, and it's not the final goal. It's not the final goal per se, conservation of cultural heritage. But to make this happen, we know that we need specific tools and innovative tools. So I'm going to share with you a few cases from our direct experience, which are like tentatives to make this transfer into practice happen. And I choose three main cases, three World Heritage sites with some differences. The first one is very close from where I'm speaking from. It's the Stupinigi Palace. It's a monument, it's a complex, it's a monumental complex, where the goal was basically not to manage, not to approach the management of this place as a museum, as it is, part of this place is a museum, but as the whole complex, which is a combination of the museum, the gardens, the park, the agricultural fields, the rural premises, I mean, many, many different activities. How to integrate all of them. First of all, understanding what's the economic, so in numbers, what's the value of all this complex. Try to measure, try to, yes, have an idea of the consistency of it. And then we try to translate this into action plans, which are related to culture, of course, but to tourism as well, and to all the socioeconomic activities, in this case, the rural production activities, which are part of the same meaning of cultural heritage of this place. Translating into a large, a huge master plan with details for attaching possible uses for each of the parts of the components of this area. But the uses were defined by the capacity of creating an economic value and creating an impact on not just on the complex, but of course on the whole territory. Just a sample, this is one of the projects attached to the cultural heritage of Stupinigi, which is the matching market. So how to match the cultural productivity of this area with the city of Turin, which is just 10 kilometers far. So the market for buying what is produced in the rural area of this place. I'm saying something that to some of us probably is pretty obvious, no, in principle, but in our experience, to transfer this into real practice or into actions, that's not immediate when we come to decision makers, people having responsibility toward cultural heritage, is not immediate. And of course, when I say that we tried to define the economic rationale for this management plan of this place, of course, we calculated, we made our estimation, we tried to figure what is the capacity of producing economic values, investing, of course, after investing into a cultural place like this. This is an example, a very recent one. A second one, which I would like to share, is different. Still our data site is Genova, a little bit more far from Torino. And here, the question, of course, we are talking about not a monument, but a big city, a big portion of the historic city center is registered into the World Heritage List. It's made of Baroque and Renaissance palaces, but the World Heritage Site is just a part of a city, of a historic center, of an entire city, which is a complex one, is a big one. Of course, most of you, I guess, know what Genova is and can easily figure all the layers of complexity which is presenting. And even if we focus, if we zoom on the historic city center, it's not just about beautiful, rich of art palaces. It's about shops, commerce, the life of the city, a city which is particularly also mixed in uses. Why I'm saying this? Because when the question was how to approach a new management plan for the city of Genoa, it was obviously the case not to talk just about conservation, but especially to talk about development. And the question was how to make, okay, it's framed, it's okay, we have actions, plans, wonderful, but how to make it work? And especially we tried to define, as you can see a figure from the scheme, to define how to concretely define tools to put in practice this, especially stressing the financial dimension, which is very often the critical one. And to make it happen, basically we followed, and we are following, because we are doing this, two main strategies. The first one, providing the responsibility of managing all this to the municipality, not to the cultural office, not to the tourism office, but to the economic development department, which is, I don't know if probably not unique, but very rare that a World Heritage Site has, I mean, the responsibility of managing a cultural heritage site, a World Heritage property, is in the hands of the economic department. We believe that it should be like that, and luckily it's happening, it's already ongoing. The second point is, which is of course related to this one, is to really connect cultural heritage to the development strategies of the city, making the cultural heritage of Genoa, the World Heritage Site of Genoa, not just something to conserve, to attract tourism. No, we believe that it should be part of all the main development strategies of the city related to accessibility, to mobility, to social inclusion, social development, community development, resilience, because Genova is a city which is investing a lot, as many other cities, on resilience to changes, climate change, demographic change, technology. So this is an ongoing experiment. We will see the results, but it's very promising for the future. And a third case, which I would like to mention, is again a different one. We are a little bit more far, still in a port city, which is Port Louis in Mauritius. Here the question, here in this city, there is a very small World Heritage Site, which is a Pravasi Gap, very small, probably the smallest, at least which I know of the World Heritage List. And you see, the red dot, that's the site with a growing city all around it. You can see from this picture, and you can easily figure what's the problem facing this site. And the question here is not about conserving, managing, it's not that one, it's how to resist towards this real estate aggressive development, which of course is about economics. All the city is facing this. Ancient buildings are being substituted by the new one, the big ones you can figure from this picture. So our task, we did a work a few years ago there, our task was how to find a solution, harmonizing conservation with development, where, I mean, we cannot like use just ordinary tools. Of course, speaking the economic language, the financial language was the only possible way. And we set it, of course, we did our estimation, analysis, willingness to pay for investing into culture, master plan, etc. But the real, the crucial point was this one. Thanks to all this, we were able to set this tool. I was talking about the need of specific tools because there are no recipes. The specific tools here identified was what we called a revolving fund. Okay, let's not stop investors to come, real estate investors to come, but let's try to address their willingness to invest money, millions of dollars, not just on new buildings where they want, but also on the historical buildings, which are in need of being taken care about, not just physically, but also being used. And this is a pretty interesting case, one of the most interesting in which I've been working. Again, also opening the question of the role, what's the role of World Heritage? The role of World Heritage sites, I don't know if it was clear in the cases which I was choosing, but to me, to our experience, is not just about themselves. It's about, of course, the context in which they are. And it's about the people, because we are doing all this for improving our quality of life. So it's about society, it's about economy. There are many other cases which we are working on currently. This is, for instance, in Pakistan, in a project which was financed by World Bank, the World Bank. So again, the logic is here, it was very clear. The World Bank financing into cultural heritage for creating an added value into some, in this case, temples, historical temples, about Sikh. But this kind of policies in many other countries, not only European countries, are pretty evident. The willingness to invest into cultural heritage to create development. The point is how. The real point is how to make this happen, because there is evidence, there is literature, but then, to me, the most delicate, the most difficult component is how to find solutions fitting specific contexts where stakeholders, priorities, urgencies are always different. And yes, we are, as a foundation, we are assisting a growing demand for these tools from big institutions, from cities, but also from small organizations working with cultural heritage. How to be equipped with tools for understanding how to govern the economic and financial mechanism. This was an impact evaluation that we did for the Museo Egizio, which is one of the most important museums in Italy. Just to give you a couple of figures, the Museo Egizio, to function, it cost 10 million per year, and it produced a value, an impact, an economic impact of almost 200 millions per year. And this is a question facing now not just by the big institutions, but also the small organization. And what is interesting also, as a very last reflection to share, what is interesting is that there are no, of course, absolute values. All these estimations, of course, are not providing the final figure, the final number. But it's interesting the process of taking example from good practices of working with culture and economics, and many other organizations which never were using such instruments for many reasons. Now they do. Now they are asking for that. This is, for instance, the Royal Museums of Torino. We are working with them for now. We just finished to produce for them, with them, the second business plan of the museum. The second one in 3 years. They never did something like that before. So there is a demand. There is a demand for this kind of tools for facing the big changes, the big questions which are emerging nowadays. So I'm stopping here. I hope I stayed within the time, and that's my contribution for this session. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you very much, Alessio. We're aware that the time is never enough because you're tackling, all of you, the four of you, very relevant and important topics. And thank you very much for going into details and providing us with case studies and context-based processes. I would like now to introduce our next speaker, Professor Dr. Christopher Gustafsson. Hello, Christopher. Christopher is a professor at the department, Sorry, Christopher, I will share my screen again. Yes. Christopher is professor at the Department of Art History Conservation at Uppsala University. His transdisciplinary research is focusing on boundary-spanning challenges and opportunities for cultural heritage as a driver for sustainable growth and heritage-led innovation-driven regional/urban development. Currently, he's engaged in the Horizon 2020 research projects CLIC, Ruritage, and Bicultur. And he also conducts research on fields of creative powers, and he's one of the founders of the Holland model. Thank you very much for being with us, Christopher. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. See if I can share my presentation here. And thank you so much for inviting me to this webinar. And I'm very happy to meet you all, and I'm looking forward also to discuss this. I think the topic of this discussion, of this webinar is of course very important, but I think that we are also in a time that we are hopefully more involved in this question. I mean, we coming from the heritage side. So, but still, I think it is needed. A lot of things are needed to be done. I had a seminar, I think it was last year. Sorry, of course, it was before COVID-19, so it's already 2 years ago. We had a seminar in Visby World Heritage Site, and the responsible conservation for the heritage site. And we discussed regional development programs and things like that. And she mentioned that she just had a meeting with the regional mayor and his staff in Visby in Gotland, the region of Gotland in Sweden. And she proposed that the World Heritage Site should be given priority in the regional development program. But the regional mayor, he replied this: job creation. It's all about job creation. If you cannot show how cultural heritage contributes to create new jobs, you cannot give preservation ambitions a priority in the regional development strategies. And she didn't have an answer. She couldn't reply this question during that meeting. And I mean, I'm not so surprised, but still many of our colleagues in also at important positions of the society still need more, let's say, training in this kind of discussion, but also education and seminar like this. So I'm very happy that you are organizing this seminar, and hopefully this could be the starting point for or continue to work. I mean, we already heard so many good examples and so good important facts for these discussions, but still we need to be better to communicate. I still think that. Anyway, to many, including the regional mayor in Visby, conservation is often still regarded as an obstacle to development. And that means that we have, during the years, often end up in a discussion about ethics or moral discussion about finding argument for preservation. And in line with this also, preservation has been regarded as a cost to the society. So this is still what you often meet. In Europe, it's already 15 years ago, but it was, in my opinion, a very important change of the mindset for many actors in the culture field and in the culture sector, but also including the cultural heritage sector. But more important, also including decision makers and policy makers at maybe first local and regional level, but in the end also at national and maybe also European level. And that was a report presented by a consultancy firm in Brussels, KIA, that gave figures of the importance of culture and also the part of the culture and the creative industries for the European GDPs. Today, the figures has increased. It's more or less doubled in 15 years, and it's now, of course, this is before the COVID-19, so probably the figure is today a little bit lower. But anyway, the important thing was that this was a kind of door opener to the policymakers. And some years later, a colleague from Norway, Terje Nypan, and maybe you know him, he conducted a study for the heritage, and he saw more or less the same figures for cultural heritage in general. So this could be an important starting point for see how we can reach the policy level. So today I will speak more about how to see the possibilities to develop heritage-led development programs, and also how we can communicate, hopefully a little bit better with important decision makers, mostly at local and regional levels. One important understanding is, of course, not to regard conservation as a cost to the society. Instead, it has to be understood as an investment. And what follows with this investment is, of course, the return of investment. So what we are doing now, I think all in this seminar, but also we at Uppsala University, is to see how we can understand the return of investments. They could understand them, as we were before, in terms of the sustainable development and the UN SDGs, and see how they affect the different goals of the Agenda 2030. And of course, also it's important to understand the not planned effects and the spillover effects. So in Europe, all regions are working with the regional development programs. And I think this goes also for countries outside Europe. And in Europe, we call them regional innovation strategies for smart specialization. And that means that they put innovation in focus, but also important to understand and also highlight each region's strengths and competitive advantages. And I believe that the second bullet point here, of course, you can understand it also from a heritage point of view, and also, of course, the third one, the region's assets and capability to learn, etc. But the important thing is that this is a huge negotiation processes between different levels of the society, but also from negotiation between different industries to see which should you give priority to. And this is also linked in Europe to a huge investment programs and let's say just a lot of money. So the work is at a regional level to see how we can develop these smart specialization strategies. And for us, and including the conservation officer in Visby, to see how you can also give priority to for instance, to heritage sites. So recently we conducted a study to see and took a look at all smart specialization strategies in Europe and see what is the situation for heritage within these documents. And I think the result is was I think I need to say negative. And it was not so many regions that gave priority to heritage. In less, I think we can say that less than 10% of all regions in Europe give priority to heritage. And if you look at the map, you can see that they are mostly in the southern parts of Europe. And you can find them in Spain, Portugal, and Italy, and Romania and Greece. But not so much in the northern parts and the country where I come from, Sweden. We cannot see them at all. So now we are conducting following up and detailed studies about the regional development programs and what is the operative program to the strategies, and see how they understand it. We also try to understand the link of the decision-making processes, who is involved and when, where are the meetings, and where should we be part of this discussion. Because I think we need to learn how to negotiate, what kind of knowledge and what kind of arguments is needed in this particular situation. Because I think it's differ a lot from the conservation side to the local development program and the business plan for a heritage site to the regional and national level, and we need to understand these processes. In presentations like this, I like to quote Jane Jacobs here, and she said that old ideas can sometimes use new buildings, but new ideas must use old buildings. So, and starting from that, I think we can try to understand the relation between heritage and innovation. And maybe we need to put a word between these so we can speak about culture, heritage, creativity, and innovation. Maybe it's a little bit easier to understand it. But it is, if you boil it down, needed to find a way to negotiate with stakeholders that simply are not, or policymakers that simply are not are so interesting in heritage and conservation, preservation of cultural heritage. So we need to understand the game playing, so to say. We need to understand what they appreciate, what kind of values are important for them, and what kind of policy are they working within, and what facts are needed, and also what kind of resources, etc., do they have. So we started with this and see how can we meet the regional policymakers. Well, one important thing was to understand the regional development programs and the aim of those. And then we made a study to see the relation between culture and let's say variables that describe the possibilities for regional development, socioeconomic statistics, etc. And we saw in this heat map, we can see where these relations are as strongest, because according to the literature, there is where we can find, at least we believe that we can find the possibilities for an innovation-driven economy. And we try to understand the relation between culture, heritage, and these opportunities. So we can break this down to this kind of diagram or figure. It's called a minimum spanning tree. And here you can see the strongest relation between all the statistics or databases we were using in this study. So it is approximately 250 databases, and we can see how they are clustering together. And we can see that in this minimum spanning tree we can find different. We can call it center. We can see how, for instance, databases that are describing different employment situation are gathering together, and we can see where the research and innovation, etc. is. So what we are interested in is a couple of things. One is to see where is the heritage located, and you can see it in the northwest corner. But we will also see who are the closest friends, so to say, because we believe that we can create new, stronger networks and partnership if we can identify these and see how they can be stronger. What we really want to do is to see if we can link research and innovation close together with the cultural heritage. And the idea is to see if we can also develop it into the center of this figure. So, for instance, culture, we can see it's very close to traditional economy here in this region. And we can also see that museums, this is not the conservation field so much, it's more museums, but they are very closely linked to the older people's incomes. And I think this is something that we still are studying and try to understand, but it is not so much money, of course, involved in this. But anyway, we have some strategies to see how we can improve this. And when I'm speaking about this, I can say that this study for this region was part of a greater regional development strategy, which was actually awarded with a golden medal in Sweden last year for best plan, so to say, during the awards of architecture in Sweden. So, and that was a novelty. I will not say that our part was so important for that, but it's important to see how we can develop new, innovative strategies, regional strategies. Another spanning tree is this one, and from another region. And I think this is also interesting for us because we can see this big figure. It's not a football and it's not a diamond. It's more like the important and strong part. The map spanning tree we saw before is just one point, but here is like a network or something clustering. And here we can find some important points that are describing the male dominance, the dominance of men in this region. And we can say that the whole figure is about the industrial society. So we can see that the industrial society is very strong in this part of Sweden still. But we know that most of the shipyards, most of the Saab car factory, for instance, and things like that are closed today. And many industrial sites are abandoned, but still, and I call this the intangible heritage is very strong. And this intangible heritage is about different things. For instance, the decision-making processes, because the decision-making processes were decided and designed during the industrial age. And that means that they are still in that system or structure. And we can see that the more innovative databases, the more innovative, let's say, culture and creative industries are not are positioned in the outskirts of the whole minimum spanning tree, meaning that they have less importance. So it's still like a battle between the traditional economy and the new innovative economy, but it also involved the intangible heritage here. So it's very delicate project for us coming from the heritage field. So anyway, recently, I think it is just a couple of weeks ago, one of my PhD students, Matthias Ripp, he defended his thesis where he presented a new model, or actually a new meta model for heritage-based urban development. And here he combined a couple of, let's say, successful heritage-led models in Europe. For instance, one that I was part of, the Halland model, where we collaborated with different sectors that, let's say, were not so interesting in heritage and have completely different objectives. But we found a way to negotiate, which we called it the training zone. And in the end, it was possible to save approximately 100 buildings from demolition, and also created more than 1,000 jobs in the construction industry, and around 350 new jobs in the improved premises. But Matthias Rittner, he has analyzed a couple of models, and he found out where the successful parts of each model and combined this into what he called a meta model. And me and Matthias, we are just finishing a paper now, so hopefully we will present. It will be published in the sustainability journal later this year. So anyway, I think if I sum it up, I think that when it comes to at least my experience from the conservation field, it started with a focus on preservation and how to find arguments and understand the historic values, and the arena for preservation was mostly urban planning. The second thing was when you had protect the building by law or legal framework, you have it was time for restoration and conservation. You need the maintenance, so you need to first to protect the building, and then you have to fix it. But now I think we are prepared to move into the building, so to say. But still, I think we are lacking, and this is one of the great challenges right now, is to see how we can develop this planning and strategies as successful as we be into the urban planning system. So, and this means that we have to start for understand the spillover effects and see how these fit other sectors and other actors of the society, for instance, within the umbrella of Agenda 2030 or the regional development programs. I think I stop here and say so. Thank you very much for inviting me one more time and for listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christopher, for this impressive presentation, and actually for the insightful feedback on how conservation should contribute to not only sustainable development, but also to the urban development, and to work hands in hands with the urban planners, also in incorporating it in the vision of smart specialization. I would like to move now to our fourth and last but not least speaker, Professor Dr. Luigi Fusco Gerard. I will share again my screen, and I will keep it shared. Luigi, don't worry, because I have your presentation as well.
Yes.
Yes. So Professor Dr. Luigi Fusco Gerard is Emeritus Professor at the University of Naples Federico II, and he is the scientific coordinator of Horizon 2020 project CLIC, which stands for Circular Models Leveraging Investment in Cultural Heritage Adaptive Reuse. He is author of more than 200 scientific publications on evaluation methods for integrated conservation of cultural heritage, strategies and tools for urban territorial sustainable development and regeneration of cultural heritage / landscape in the perspective of the circular economy and circular city. He is Deputy President of ICOMOS Italy and President of ICOMOS ICOMOS International and the Italian Scientific Interdepartmental Research Center Alberto Calzabini at the University of Naples Federico II, and he has several roles also in national and international scientific organizations. Welcome again, Luigi, and thank you for being with us today. I will start your presentation. Please just
Yes.
tell me to go next whenever is needed.
First of all, Ruba, thank you very much for this invitation. Thank you to you all. Ruba, you have introduced this seminar evoking the new paradigm and the key role of culture. We are interested not only to conserve and valorize the cultural built heritage, but to use this cultural heritage as a tool for promoting a new culture. A new culture means a culture of inclusion, a culture of collaboration and cooperation, a culture to become able together to face the tremendous challenges that we have. So the title evokes some questions. Exactly, the first question is, which doesn't mean the circular paradigm. Circular paradigm now means the attention to the climate change and also to the ecological transition that is required in all European national plans for resilience and recovery. The second element is the human-centered approach, the human-centered paradigm, and the role of adaptive reuse between these two approaches, these two different paradigms, and at the end, which kind of evaluation processes can we propose? I am interested about the circular city implementation, so my approach is focusing planning activities. The next, please. The next, please. So we can combine this concept, the circular ecological approach, the human-centered approach, and adaptive reuse. The next, please. And yes, and in the click research, we are trying to extract some guidelines, some solutions about the tools, the new tools in terms of business tools, business models, about financial tools, about evaluation tools for this adaptive reuse. So first, the next, please. The next, please. The next, please. Okay, the human-centered approach is the approach that recognizes the principle, the value of the human dignity, as Immanuel Kant has proposed many years ago. The intrinsic value of the human being as a value in itself and for itself. So this means that the image of the human being is not the image of Homo economicus, but is much more rich than the image proposed by orthodox mainstream economics. The human-centered approach is characterized, first of all, by the capacity to generate and regenerate relationships that can be transformed in new bonds that regard also, in particular, future generations, so that we can become able to reduce fragmentation, divisions, and so on, promoting trust, inclusion, cooperation, take care of general interests. The next, please. This means that we need, in terms of evaluation, specific indicators. For example, about the well-being, the quality of life, the health of people, not only about the jobs creation. Job is very important for assuring the dignity of the human being, because work is a bridge through which each subject entering relationships with the community, the society. The human-centered approach is interested to promote new networks, new communitarian networks. For example, the third sector, association, voluntary, mutual cooperative institution, and so on and so on. And this means also new indicators when we try to propose some new evaluation tool. The next, please. The technologies are only in the human-centered approach, are only tools for the human flourishing. The human beings in the center of development, not the technology. So the technologies cannot be used against the dignity of the human beings, and such as can happen in some experiences that we know very well. Attention is to the environmental impact that can reduce the biodiversity, considered that it is the basis, the ground for human well-being. The next, please. The second topic is about the circular ecological approach. This circular economic approach can start from because we recognize that we all human beings are part of nature. This is a new notion because the mainstream economists, the normal conventional economic paradigm consider nature as a tool to be used by human being without thresholds, without limits. No, we are part of the natural ecosystem. We are part of nature. And we have to take care of nature because nature is the ground of all life networks, also of our life networks. And nature offers us many flows in terms of ecosystem services. And all the economy of nature, that means the ecology processes, are characterized by circular processes. And we have to respect these circular processes and to imitate these circular processes, having respect to the ecological treasures. This means to become able to implement new symbiosis between the human being and the nature, between the human economy and the natural economy. Through a new metabolism, avoiding a growing entropy, the growing entropy that is characterizing our time, and recognizing that the health of the nature is our human health, is the condition of our health. So the conclusion is that the nature is the most important urban infrastructure. And the COVID experience has showed us too many human costs due to the lack or to the scarcity of open green spaces. The ecological approach shows us that it is necessary to consider the experiences of cultural heritage valorization strictly linked to the rehabilitation, valorization of natural areas. They are strictly integrated in the new paradigm of conservation. This means that we can reduce pollution, contributing to reduce pollution, to reduce climate change negative impacts, and to reuse as much as possible materials. This is the approach that has been proposed by ecological economics. That is an approach that recognizes the entropy, the importance of entropy, the importance of complexity in economics, the importance of metabolism, the importance of the evolution. The equilibria are only dynamic equilibria, the necessity, the capacity to self-organization, and in particular, the capacity to become adaptive as a natural bioecosystem. The next one, please. So, the next one, please. No, again, the next one, next one, next one, okay. No, before, please, before, okay. The role of adaptive reuse. The role of adaptive reuse of cultural heritage between the ecological paradigm and the human-centered paradigm in relation to the new evaluation tools. For improving what? For improving the circular governance, for improving the implementation of circular city. This means today for improving sustainability, because circular organization sustainability are strictly linked. The next one, please. Adaptive reuse evokes the message of Patrick Geddes, the bioecological dimension of the dynamic urban system, and also of Georgescu Rogens, that is the founder of bioeconomics, and evokes the Schumpeterian evolutionary economics also very clearly. Why? Because complex systems recognize that all economic systems are dissipative, in the sense that they import energy internally and they export entropy externally. Conclusion: adaptive reuse has to move creatively between two dynamic tensions, two dynamic poles, between two conflicting field force. This is centrifugal field force and a centripetal field force. In this way, the reuse can help us to become an effective heritage reuse. The next one, please. In particular, the adaptive reuse can help us to reduce entropy. And the adaptive reuse is the continuous adjustment and the continuous adaptation in the time as the behavior of natural adaptive complex systems. This is the image. The next one, please. This means that the ecological approach and the humanistic approach have a common element. One of these common elements is the intrinsic value that is recognized in the natural ecosystems and also in the human-centered approach to each human person. The other one, please. The next one, please. Adaptive reuse should be necessarily considered in a systemic perspective. In a systemic perspective, this means that in a way able to connect built environment and natural environment, man-made capital and natural capital, also with the human and social capital in mutual relationships. This means that the adaptive reuse should be considered not in points, but through areas in which many points, many sites are considered and reorganized in a systemic perspective. The next one, please. Because in this way, the outcomes can be much more evident. The benefits, not only as Donovan has already emphasized in terms of jobs, but also in terms of contribution to the climate change reactions and so on. Many benefits are coming from the circular model, yes. So, as required by the national plans for recovery and resilience. Some kind of benefits are the connection of community to nature, the promotion of cultural cooperation, the improvement of resilience. Next one, please. Evaluation. role of evaluation. The next one, please. The evaluation is a key element in adaptive reuse because adaptive reuse is required to make a choice between the change, the necessary change, and the conservation of elements, between elements of permanence and elements of should be transformed, between the new needs and the needs of future generations that are linked to the capacity to respect the intrinsic values of the heritage. One consequence is that no maximization, no optimization, no minimization is possible, but only in adaptive reuse, the search of satisfying solutions. The next one, please. This is required also in the historical landscape recommendation of UNESCO, because the logic is exactly the same of the dynamic evolutionary economic approach. The logic is to become able to manage the change, conserving, but in the same time development through conservation. This means that we should have the capacity to distinguish and to select critically the essential element from the accessory elements, the intrinsic value and the instrumental values. And this is exactly the evolutionary logic that and it promotes also the participatory logic, the participatory approach. Next one, please. So the evaluation in this perspective becomes a social, cultural, community construction. It is not an expert construction. It is the production of an iterative and an iterative participatory process that goes on through approximation, through mistakes, to learning capacity, able to avoid new mistakes and so on, in the direction to the next one, to identify new satisfactory solution between conflict needs, between conflict goals, between conflict criteria and objectives. This evaluation does not compare given solutions. This evaluation activity is an activity that is an engine to produce new projects, new design, new ideas of organization. The role of evaluation is not to compare given alternatives, but it is to stimulate creatively, with the creativity, new alternatives, new, more performing activities. This is the real role of evaluation, in my opinion. So the next one, please. The next one, please. So you have to understand that, for example, in the co-design, in the participatory approach, the project are only some ideas of projects. The criteria are assumed only for the first step, but through the discussion they can change. Some criteria can be cancelled and some other criteria can be added. And the weights of criteria, of the weights of needs, of the weights of objectives can change some weight with some priority can be cancelled, and some other weight can be recognized by the participatory approach. So the process is strictly linked to identify to this process, continuous process, the more satisfying solution. The next one, please. Which is the characteristic of this game, this participatory game, that we have only, or in general, only qualitative evaluations. And the quantitative evaluation are very limited, very restricted. And it is not possible, this means that it's not possible to use in this co-design, we cannot use the techniques based on willingness to pay, such as cost-benefit analysis. We can only use multi-criteria evaluation tools in the qualitative. So the next one. So we can face this kind of evaluation process through different techniques. For example, regime, for example, Lectre, Eva Mix, NIAD, community impact evaluation that was proposed many years ago by Nathan and Litchfield, but reshaped naturally. And in this way, we can start to compare alternatives, deducing some priority that can be changed, including new data, new information, new knowledge, new structural knowledge. The conclusion is that the evaluation tools for transforming a dead site into a living system should be characterized by social indicators, economic indicators, financial indicators, ecological indicators, but also human indicators, because the perception of needs, the perception of satisfying needs. Next one, please. The emotional connection between people and places should be incorporated in the evaluation process. My conclusion is the next one, please. My conclusion is that economic approach has offered the notion of total economic value in the heritage asset. That is very interesting, but it is useful when we have to decide if to spend public money to sustain by public money, by public funds, yes, a project. But in planning terms, we have to recognize the necessity to use also some other approach. And some other approach means the capacity to interpret, not only to assess, to measure, but to interpret the values incorporated, and in particular the intrinsic values of the through this constructivistic and not positivistic approach. And recognize that the circular model, the circular economic model, as in the experiences that we have, is grounded on collaboration and cooperation, but it offers also a cultural cooperation, and I think that the next one, I think that it is very important today in this fragmented, in particular European society. And this regards not only each person, but also the entrepreneurs. The entrepreneurs have to decide the investment also with an eyes in this direction. The next one, please. This means, in conclusion, to become able to consider in each choice for adaptive reuse the instrumental values, economic returns, financial returns, jobs returns, and so on and so on, but also the intrinsic values. In the iterative process, as in this scheme diagram, as Milan Zeleny has showed some years ago, and recognize that the creativity is the fundamental ingredient for an adaptive reuse characterized by the success, not only in designing, but also and in particular in managing in the investment, in the management project. The next one, please. And I think, in conclusion, that the circular cultural heritage ecosystem that should be one of the outcomes of the conservation of heritage, some entrance point for conservation, can be important outcome, but the more important outcome is to promote a new culture. And the intrinsic value can become important, a useful tool for sharing this cultural perspective that is needed, required in the European Union. And I hope that the intrinsic value can become as a driver for the circular human-centered adaptive reuse. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Luigi, for this impressive and timely theoretical framework where we can see adaptive reuse embracing the circular paradigm, at the same time also the human-centered approach. And your point is very important, that the discipline needs also to find new valuation tools where we can evaluate the intrinsic value, the instrumental values, but also the relational values related to this systemic perspective. Thank you very much for this very important and relevant scientific contribution. I would like to leave the floor now to Professor Christian Ost to start the discussion. But in order to provide Christian some time to collect the questions, I would like very quickly to ask 3 questions to our audience. Sorry, I just need to exit the presentation mode and ask you just 3 questions. So please be prepared with your phones or your computers. I'm sharing again now. Yes. Okay. So please connect to www.wooclap.com. Your code is XPPXZC. I repeat again, your code is XPPXZC. Your first question is, where are you from? We would like to learn from which city you're connected and you're interacting with us today. We would love to hear from you. London, I can see London. I'm connecting from Brussels. Amman, Jordan. This is great to see that we have colleagues joining from all over the globe. Thank you for being here. Slovenia, Selje. In the meantime, I know that our panelists are connecting from Italy, from Sweden, and from the United States. Our coordinator of new heritage approaches is connecting from Brazil. I can see Norway as well. I will move now to our second questions. You can continue populating the question in the meantime. Our second question is, what's your professional background? We would like to know whether you come from academia, you're a site manager, you work in a public authority, in a private organization, in a non-for-profit. Perfect. So we have multidisciplinary backgrounds. This is great. If you're wondering what the code is, again, it's XPPXZC. And now I'm moving to our third and final question. Why are you interested in heritage economics? While reflecting on this question, we can come back to it maybe later, but please fill in the chat box your questions for our four panelists. Christian will be opening now the discussion in order to address your questions and raise additional relevant points. I can see you're already populating the question. You're interested in local development, innovation, labor, tools, discussions, interdisciplinary discussions, I imagine, revival, research. Okay, very good. I think this is food for thought for our panelists also in order to address your questions. I'll stop sharing now. And Christian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ruba. If you can hear me, well, they are, and you can see, of course, in the question and answer on the chat, you get, I guess, 3 interesting questions that goes really maybe far beyond what we was expected to do here, but I would like maybe to start a discussion about that, at least 1 or 2 interventions from the panelists. So just to make it short, the very first question is about the fact that we have seen with the COVID-19 that financial resources could be, from a public oriented policies really be spent, and that unfortunately culture of course is not as never maybe have this same response from the public authorities. And so the question is more about the system and more about does that mean that capitalism is not an obstacle, I would say, about that. And maybe this first question, I would like maybe I will do the 2, just mention the 2 last question, but maybe suggest Donovan maybe to think about this first question, because I think that this goes also about the place of the market in conservation, and his intervention contribution really showed that to me that the market could play a role, but I will give him maybe the floor for this first question. The second question is about North and South. So some of the audience think that our contribution were still too much maybe Western oriented. Sometimes, as you know, we still complain about UNESCO being too much European centered. And this is maybe a question that if some of you could take about all the examples, maybe Alessio, because the example of the Mauritius Islands, I think was something that goes about beyond what we expect in a European or Western area. And the third question, was about authenticity, but basically about the fact that if we go if we follow the trend that we know these days about really a difficulty to finance culture, and maybe to see also to the successful history of conservation, because we conserve and we have protected maybe more than ever in the few 50 years that we did before. Is there a risk that we have, I would say, a two-tier system of financing heritage? You will have the economic viable heritage, and then you will be the one which may be very authentic but not really viable. It's not a new question, I think, here in the scope, but if either Christopher or maybe Luigi would like to have a word about that, or maybe Luigi about how the system, the human-centered system, can maybe deal with that, or maybe Christopher about the Holland model. So these are the three questions. The first question, maybe Donovan, can you have a comment on that?
I can. Of my three brilliant colleagues here on the panel, I'm the one who's not an academic. I'm a very much a kind of applied economics amateur at all of this, and so I don't have any theory at all. So I'm not remotely prepared to argue the positive or negative of a capitalist system. What I will say is the excellent point about the huge amount of public resources in the last year and a half by governments of every stripe have been put into response to the pandemic, and that no equivalent thing has ever been done with cultural heritage. Certainly true. I would say, so economic system aside, it's a political system. It's a political decision, whether it's a socialist or a Marxist or a capitalist system. It's the political system that makes resource allocation decisions. In the market systems, if we want more investment in, I think it's possible to have more investment in heritage resources and at the same time protect them. And that is to create policy structures, incentives, tools to encourage the private sector, capitalists, if you want to call it that, but private sector investment in heritage resources. And that can be effective. And it's a way without a direct appropriation from the national treasury to get expenditures of capitalist money into heritage. Now, we need to protect that. We make sure that the way that is done doesn't just muck up the heritage resource. But I think regardless of the economic system, it's the political system that has to make the tough political decisions to incentivize, either expend directly out of the public treasury or structure tools, incentives, policies that encourage someone else to make those investments.
Does anyone else please raise your hand if you want to intervene? Of course, I'm not. I'm just moderating debate. I'm not connecting it, but I think this is already something that that can be said about actually this misunderstanding about sometimes what economics is about. It's not politics. It's not. Neither the banking system. So we deal with a question here of resources, of jobs, of people. If someone else would intervene on that, do not hesitate. Otherwise, I give the floor to Alessio for the second question about maybe some experience about outside of the Western world.
Yes, thank you, Christian. Thank you also for the question and for giving this possibility to reply, to offer a sort of answer to this, and try to link also with the other points which were raised by the audience and also by my colleagues. Let me react like this. My feeling from our working experience is that heritage, I mean, the meaning of heritage, the sense of discussing globally with all of you in a global webinar, it's already clear that something is changing. And my feeling is also that cultural heritage, the same meaning of cultural heritage, is changing. That's obvious. That's very obvious. And my feeling is that we would probably need to push ourselves to get a little bit out of the usual categories and to be able to understand different languages, different than the ones that we are used. I mean, out of our comfort zone, comfort ones. Authenticity. Will it be the same? Will it have the same meaning in the next future? Conservation itself. What will be conservation and the profession of conservation in the next future? Are we sure that they will be the same? I'm pretty sure that they will be different. There are countries in this world, luckily not in Europe, luckily for ourselves, egoistically, but some countries, in some countries facing climate changes, cultural heritage is already disappearing. We can see it. And because of climate change, not because of words which are most evident immediately, we will conserve them. No way, it's already happening. And I don't know, I was thinking also to policies toward cultural heritage, like audience development. What does it mean nowadays to develop the audience for tourism, for visiting museums? I don't know, after a pandemic, does it have any meaning to concentrate investments, policies to develop the audience for cultural heritage? I don't know. My feeling is a bit. I don't have solutions. Just trying to find the proper questions. Sustainability, what it is about. I mean, no more. We need a slogans about sustainability. We know that it is about future, that it is about people. That it is probably beyond the usual categories that we are using. It's about politics. There is a political dimension, of course, because if it is about people and heritage is about people, there must be a political dimension. And its goal must be probably to make a good use of our culture, our cultural heritage, not to lose opportunities, because we cannot, in critical situations like the ones that we are living everywhere, we cannot lose opportunities. And talking about Africa and out of Europe countries, I do believe that most of the opportunities are actually in the less developed countries, because there are the most evident needs, and this means that the opportunities are there. I made the case, I briefly mentioned the case of Mauritius in Africa. We are working also in Asia. Opportunities are there because needs are there, and also because let's say the push for innovation, not for using digital technologies, because they are tools, as Luigi was saying, just tools. But the push for innovation, the urgency for innovation, there is much more urgent, according to what we see, than here. We have all the comforts. There is no real push for innovation. We are really confused on what innovation is. We see in our institutions, universities, everything is like fully slow, totally slow. I mean, resilient to any innovation. So I don't want to be too much critical, because of course it's complicated to provide an answer. But my feeling is that most of the opportunities will be, even towards cultural heritage, will be on youth and in developing countries.
Thank you, Alessio. I think that we are a bit short of time, so we go on about the question. Maybe Luigi, something about I see about this question about the risk of a two-tier also protection, but also about the circular economy. A question about how effective it is, for example, for tourism, because we know that sometimes tourism doesn't produce or generate local benefits, but something else. So maybe a word on that. And Christopher, if you want to intervene after that, do not hesitate.
Yes, thank you. I think it's a lot of research going on in the sustainable tourism, and it's correct that it will probably change a lot after the COVID-19. We will travel in another way, but also hopefully with a more, let's say, sustainable or climate change awareness. And speaking about that, I'm involved in a scientific plan for ICOMOS at the moment, and there we decided to change the whole research program, so it will not be focused on different, let's say, heritage problems or challenges. We instead changed the whole idea with the scientific plan to just look at the climate change. So that will be the overall, like say, an umbrella for all research strategies coming from ICOMOS. And I think this is something that we need to understand here also. And I think that is one of the one great challenges for everybody working with the heritage, to see how we can understand the contribution from conservation and preservation of cultural heritage to the sustainability and to the sustainable development, as well as to fight the climate change. And this means that we cannot just sit and focus on the protection and the protection only. So it will be more protection, let's say, pro-action oriented instead of protection oriented. And this means that we need to develop new understanding of the adaptive reuse, and also what Luigi Fusco Gerard just talked about, our role in the sustainable development, but also in the circular economy. And this also means that we need to understand and better communicate heritage as a resource for this, because I mean, conservation in the end is about taking care of existing resources, and this is also the more or less overall objective with circular economy. So it goes hand in hand, but still we don't have the position in the strategies at local and regional level. And I gave an example from Europe, but I think this is going, it's valid for the whole world and for regions all over the world, how to not just as a starting point, looking at the protection, instead see also how we can understand the contribution to the society as in general, but mostly to the sustainable development, sustainability, and to the climate change moment. So, and I think this is also open up the discussion about authenticity, because that is something that is pretty much discussed in the heritage field at the moment. And so simply, what is authenticity, and is it that you continuously use something like a building or an artifact or whatever it is that part of the authenticity, or is it just a material? So is it the intangible and the tangible values that we need to understand and develop here? And last thing, yes, it's a lot of money somewhere coming to the different parts after in the post-COVID-19 scenario. And I try to give an example from how you can understand and plan preservation, conservation activities and conservation work with the focus of recovery, let's say the economy, and see how you can understand how heritage contribute to create new jobs, new business, small scale startups, and etc. And also in that sense, how it linked to the innovation-driven economy. So I stop there. I know I'm short of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher, for his comments. Luigi, do you want to extend one of the comments? You unmute, maybe. And yeah.
Okay. Do you hear me? Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. No, I want only to stress an aspect. Dunque, I think that heritage conservation today should be strongly incorporated in our national resilience and recovery plans, showing how the conservation or valorization of the cultural heritage can be included in the ecological and digital transition. That is today the first goal of all 28 national plans of resilience recovery. But in the same time, don't forget that many of these national plans introduce and evoke the circular model. But on the other side, the goal of this national recovery and resilience plan is to stress, to improve, to reinforce the cultural resilience, not only the ecological, economic resilience, but also the cultural resilience. That is a very important issue, because when financial resource will finish in 2026, if we have not a cultural resilience, this means a new mindset, we cannot solve the tremendous challenges that we have introduced with this recovery, because this is the greater transformation of the human beings in a short time that they never happened. So it is important. I give an example. The electric car was invented more than a century ago, but electric car was refused by culture. Culture is a key element for improving positive outcomes or for stopping. So I think that the reuse, the rehabilitation of the cultural heritage in the perspective of the circularity of the circular model that offer a culture of cooperation, collaboration, bonds, new bonds regeneration and so on, is a key element for guarantee the resilience also in cultural dimension. And the cultural dimension evokes also the if we are speaking too much under the UNESCO point of view, that is the European point of view. But I think that UNESCO is not a European, assuming the European point of view, is a world point of view. And I am very proud to stress this point of view, because the European culture and Italian culture invented the human dimension, the humanism in the Renaissance, as you know, and the cultural heritage of a European country today offers the image of Europe in all over the world, and of the image of the Europe all over the world, and also of the soft power of Europe, that is a cultural power. It is not an economic, but it's a cultural power. But cultural is the more important resource for building a desirable future.
Thank you. I think that we have covered most of the questions that I get here on the chat. I will give the floor maybe to Ruba to say. I just want maybe to add many thanks, of course, to Monica, to Ruba for all the organization of that. So thank you for this opportunity to make these two webinars. They were not, planned before the year starts. So we decided to make that, and you were very flexible to do that. But I realized also how important it was, because I think that we have really a chance here to have, during those two sessions, to be together and to discuss this thing. And I was very struck by all the ideas were so converging, you know. Everyone spoke about jobs. I have a lot of notes there and I'm going to use it, but the importance of the market and of the changing governance, because this question about private and public needs also to be revisited and passed. The fact that, and I really like to thank Alessio to dare, you know, to speak about that the role of economics should be maybe in the front line. Economics is no more just a bonus, you know, that bring some spillovers to the economy, but is really intrinsic, and especially in the circular economy process, that it provides a revisitation about the intrinsic value of culture, and it's important to see these examples that he mentioned, and we have the same in Belgium, that conservation is managed at the regional level with economic policies, with jobs and all that kind of thing. And I think that this is really the kind of new approaches that we should also go. And my last word is about Schumpeter. You know that Schumpeter, but Christer, you remember that we made a presentation a few years ago, and that we spoke about Schumpeter, because Schumpeter is about transition, it's about what we live in, it's about creation and destruction. So it's about this uncertainty that you have in these changes. And I think that we all agree, and Donovan gave some evidence about how resilient can be the cultural heritage, you know. So it goes through the creation and destruction of things if we manage everything like we should. So this is really important there about this vision of changes, of innovations, and also I would say entrepreneurship, because Schumpeter was also the man who was the first to say we need also not just human-centered approach, but we need some people and individual there taking risk and making some decisions. And this should maybe also in the future come back into this discussion about conservation and heritage economics. Ruba, the last word will be with you.
Thank you very much, Christian, for this wonderful moderation. I would like to join you in thanking Monica, Vera, and all the Brazilian team. For our audience to know, Monica has been coordinating and leading this entire process since the month of November, and it was a wonderful and fruitful discussion all the time with her and all her team. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Just to leave you all with a quick takeaway. So in this session, Donovan Rickman provided us with evidence of how heritage contributes to the local economy. Alessio argued that promoting innovative finance, investment, governance, management, and business models are crucial elements for increasing the effectiveness of cultural heritage as economic production. Christopher Gustafsson explored how conservation of cultural heritage is playing an important role nowadays in relation to a number of fundamental societal challenges and how conservation can innovatively respond to such challenges. While finally, Luigi Fusco Gerard speculated on how adaptive reuse of abandoned cultural heritage can play a vital role as driver of circular economy implementation at urban and territorial level, leveraging the potential of its intrinsic value for the generation of used and new use values in a circular economy and human-centered perspective. Thank you very much for our wonderful panelists. Thank you very much for our audience. And I join Monica in inviting you in joining us on June 25th for the conclusion and the conclusive remarks of New Heritage Approaches. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Muito obrigada. Grazie mille. See you next
Thank you very much for
Have a nice
all the
weekend.
panelists and also for Ruba and Christian to
Thank you, Ruba,
participate in those sessions. Thank you very,
wonderful
very much.
sessions.
Thank
you so much.
Goodbye.